Inside Utah Politics.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin this morning with Representative Ken Ivory. He's here to discuss the book ban law he sponsored and how it's being implemented. Representative, great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Glenn's good to be here.
This has been a busy couple weeks with this law. Obviously, a huge controversial issue coming up. We'll dig into that in just a second. But before we get to that, just give us a general definition of what this law is all about in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, people like to say book banning, and there's no banning of books, right? This is age-appropriate limits on content in schools. That's all we're talking about. Should there be age-appropriate limits for what we provide children in public schools? And you know, when I came back into the legislature, I had moms call me and they said, "You wouldn't believe what's in schools." And I said, "You're right, I don't believe you." And we met and they showed me, and Glenn, this is material you can't show on the air, material that we can't show in legislative meetings, and that the parents can't show at a school board meeting. So we passed the bill, HB 374, to deal with the most egregious, right? There's two aspects. One is the bright line rule for the worst of the worst, the most pornographic things that they can take out. They don't need to do the full review of the book. This is so bad it amounts to pornography, again, the kind of stuff you can't show. The second part is what they call the taken as a whole test. And that's what they supposedly reviewed the Bible under. However, they didn't take the Bible as a whole or review any of the elements.
Okay, I want to get into that in a sec. But first, there's this term sensitive materials associated with this. How do you define sensitive materials when it comes to age appropriateness, as you discussed?
Yeah, so that was already a standard in law. So what we did is there was already a standard in law for what children couldn't bring to school or access at school. And we thought, well, let's just apply that to the books that the school provides. You know, if students aren't supposed to access the material or bring it to school, it should be fair that the schools shouldn't provide it. And so that was already in Utah law. It was 7610-1235, and it created three different standards, and we simply just adopted that into the law.
But one of the things we've seen since the implementation is a different idea or variation of what sensitive may be. So how do you balance that? Because what may be sensitive to one isn't necessarily sensitive to the other.
Yeah, so first you have that bright line rule test, right? If it's three specific things, and I mean, Glenn, I hate to even say what these are. It's 7610-1227. It's sodomy, oral sex, graphic depictions of illicit sex. So if it's those three things that come into the 7610-1227, that's what's called the bright line rule. They can just take that off the shelves. They don't have to go through the full review. For everything else, then they've got this taken as a whole test. So they look at the work, they look at the material as a whole, not a verse here or a selection there. You look at the whole work, and then you determine, does it have serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value? And they have to have objective criteria at every one of those elements. What we found in the Davis District situation, they didn't have a shred of evidence, a shred of objective criteria at any single one of those elements, Glenn.
Mm-hmm. But again, I want to get back to that point. You mentioned objective elements, and they do have a policy that they have posted. I've read through it. I know you have. But in a sense, when you start to break that down, doesn't it become subjective and up to the opinion of this committee?
Well, to some extent, right? That's why we had parents being on the committee that were part of the community.
Right.
So yeah, you look at, does Davis community, do they think the Bible has no serious value? A community that has churches on every corner that the superintendent himself says this community was founded on principles contained in the Bible. And so then you look and say, okay, well, let's look at literary value. Does the Bible have any serious literary value? Shakespeare quotes it 2,000 times. Political value. It's the #1 source document for the U.S. Constitution and the U.S. legal system. They didn't even look at that stuff, Glenn.
So the committee in the Davis School District, just to set this up a little more, decided it was age appropriate for high school kids, but not below that. So it was taken off the shelves of middle schools and elementary, and that's under review again.
Yeah, and frankly, in their own policy, that was a violation of their own policy as well, because their policy says they only review for the school level for which it was challenged.
When I first talked to you, right after this had happened, You and I spoke over Zoom. We did a story with that, and your take at the time was, okay, now let's look at the rest of the books and make age-appropriate decisions on other books. You have since changed your tune. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds to me like you're saying something different now.
I don't think that's the case at all, right?
Can you explain that then?
Yeah, so the same Davis School District that came out and made a determination with no evidence, not looking at a single element, they also acquired a book called Assassination Classroom. This is a book that shows a barely clothed young lady on a completely naked man straddling him in a sex act with guns shooting up a school. They approved that for junior high schools, Glenn. At the same time, they say the Bible has no serious value. I mean, this is out of control. They're not following the elements. It's not the elements. It's not the standard. That standard's been around for, decades. We didn't create that standard. We just adopted it. They're just not applying it. They're not looking at it. They didn't look at a single element with a single bit of objective criteria.
They have taken off shelves somewhere around 60 books, I believe. The other books that have been taken off the shelves, some may come and say, use the same argument you're using to say, you know what, these shouldn't have been taken off the shelves.
Same argument.
Response to that?
No, that's right. Same argument. You apply the same argument. I'd be interested to know how they could find that a book, Assassination Classroom, that is depicting and even illustrating sex acts and kids shooting up the school with AR-15s. I'd like to know what the serious literary value of that is. I'd like to know what the serious artistic value of that is. Let's apply the exact same test. We'd really like to see that.
And that's a fair question that I will definitely follow up on. Let's stick with the Bible, though, if we can, because that is at issue right now. Again, as I mentioned, it's under appeal. When you take a look at the Bible, though, and, with all due respect, people were saying this was going to come. They kind of foresaw this happening, at least that it would be challenged anyway. But there are themes within the Bible that could be considered sensitive. Murder, adultery, sexuality, all those issues as well.
Right. So look at what the test says. It says you take it as a whole. You don't cherry pick a verse here or a verse there. You take the Bible as a whole. They didn't do that, right? When you take it as a whole, you look at the Bible, it's a history of good and bad over millennia, right? And it makes findings of the consequences of doing good and bad things over a millennia. You pick a few things here and there, you take it out of context. That's exactly what the test says not to do. But then the Bible is not depicting illicit sex acts in the graphic manner that you have in these other books. You mentioned you looked at some of them, and there's a great difference. If you apply that standard to a book like the Bible or the French Revolution or things like that that are reporting what happened in history in a manner that is as gentle as you can to describe horrific acts that happen in history, and you apply that to historical kinds of books, they're going to end up losing a whole lot of history. That the Bible is not the glorified how-to manual of sex acts that you see in a lot of these other books. It's a very different standard.
Do you think that same standard could be applied to some of the other books that have been banned potentially as well?
Well, it should have been applied, right? It should have been applied. It is the same standard.
So by the committee, they should have applied that.
Yeah, and so first you look and see, is it so obscene that it violates the bright line rule? And most of the books that they're talking about, Glenn, really are that. I mean, there are things that I went to a school board meeting to talk to my own school board, and after half a sentence, a book that was challenged and retained, appealed and retained, and I read one sentence to my own school board, and they said, no, stop, we get it. It was so offensive in a meeting of 5 adults, they couldn't bear to hear it, understandably, but it's still in the school with the children.
We have about 30 seconds left. What's next for the Bible in the Davis County School District? It's under appeal. Where will you go from here?
Yeah, I mean, the Bible doesn't need us to defend it. The Bible's withstood thousands of years. It's the foundation of Western civilization and the founding of America. The Bible's going to be just fine. We just need to get our school people to understand and apply the standard. That's what we're missing right now.
But to be clear, you do want to see it put back on school shelves at the middle and elementary school levels in Davis County?
Yeah, I think they need to apply the appropriate standard. The Bible would be just fine. And then, as we talked about, continue to apply that standard to all of these other materials that they jump the Bible ahead of.
Representative, appreciate your time. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks, Glenn.
Still to come, the Republican convention is